On November 20th, 2025, the leaked contours of what is now widely called the Witkoff Plan set off a political storm stretching from Kiev to Brussels. According to reporting on November 19th till 20th, the 28-point framework shaped by US envoy Steve Witkoff, with channels touching Russian figure Kirill Dmitriev, asks Ukraine to accept territorial concessions, sweeping military limits, bans on Western forces, and a series of political and cultural compromises. But it is the plan's most elusive element, the one described by European officials as dangerously vague. The promised NATO-style guarantees that has triggered the most intense pushback. If NATO's security umbrella becomes conditional or undefined, what does that mean for Ukraine, Europe, and the credibility of Western deterrence going forward? Welcome to In Depth. Politica's article discusses Europe's stance, particularly EU foreign policy chief Kaja Kallas, on the Ukraine war and recent developments involving US President Donald Trump's approach. According to Politico, Kallas emphasizes that Europe cannot bear sole responsibility for ending the war. US involvement remains crucial as the greatest NATO ally. She advocates for sustained sanctions on Russia and greater reduction of Russian energy dependence across Europe. Kallas also stresses that any peace plan for Ukraine must have the approval of Kiev and Europe, rejecting proposals that would force Ukraine to capitulate or concede territory to Russia. Despite some signals of US diplomatic efforts, Kallas highlights Moscow's lack of good faith in negotiations. Her position reflects firm European support for Ukraine's sovereignty and a call for stronger collective action against Russia. Le Monde's article highlights the dangers posed to Europe by the emerging Trump-Putin axis in the context of the Ukraine war. It discusses how Trump's repeated behind-the-scene efforts to negotiate with Putin, often excluding Ukraine and Europe allies, have pushed a peace plan favoring Russian demands. The plan includes territorial concessions to Moscow, reduction of the Ukrainian military, a pledge not to join NATO, and a ban on NATO troops in Ukraine, which could lead to Ukraine's capitulation. Despite Ukraine President Zelensky's resilience, the political and corruption challenges he faces weaken Ukraine's position. The piece stresses the necessity for Europe to maintain a firm stance, continue rejecting plans imposed on Ukraine, and uphold its security interests tied to Ukraine's sovereignty. It warns that conceding to such a plan would be a security failure for Europe. Well, welcome back. And tonight or today we break down the plan and its fallout with two voices diving with us at the heart of the debate. From Brussels, Mr. Nicholas Williams, former NATO official, and from Florida, Mr. Justin Thomas Russell, Executive Director of Global Foreign Policy Center. Thank you both for being with us, and we will both track U.S. foreign policy shifts within the Trump administration and how internal divisions are shaping the proposal. So both guests are joining us as Europe expresses unease. Kiev denounces the draft as capitulation, and Washington faces questions about whether its plan clarifies the path to peace or obscure its behind strategic ambiguity. Mr. William, Mr. Russell, good afternoon to you both. And let me start with Mr. William. Based on leaks recently published, why is the NATO guarantee language in the Witkoff Plan seen as dangerously vague by European capitals? Hello, Mr. Williams.
Yes, sorry.
Do you want me to repeat the question?
Yes, because I can't hear you very well.
All right, I'll try to raise my voice as much as I can, and they will fix the voice issue. Now, based on the leaks recently published, why is the NATO guarantee language in Witkoff Plan seen as dangerously vague by European capitals?
Well, this is what the Russians wanted, but the European capitals haven't been consulted, and in effect, this proposal seeks to decide for Europe and the NATO capitals what their relationship with Ukraine will be. And without consultation, without even a hint of what was coming, the United States has shown a certain arrogance and ignorance in terms of this key issue of a security guarantee. Now, the document does imply a security guarantee, the United States security guarantee, but that security guarantee will be compensated for according to the agreement. So is Europe going to pay the United States for a guarantee to Ukraine? I mean, it's totally incoherent.
Mm-hmm. So you at the very beginning you said that there were no consultation between the United States and Europe. So we're speaking here about the U.S. coming out with what it sees as a plan or a fair plan from its own perspective, right?
Yeah, yes. Well, and we don't know exactly what the status is of this. Rubio has called it ideas. The White House spokesperson has said that Trump supports it. There are reports that President Trump expects Zelensky to agree in short order. We don't know what the status is, but what is clear is that this plan decides decisively and puts its weight decisively in favor of Russian demands.
Right. Mr. Russell, you followed what Mr. Williams said here. So from Washington's perspective, is this ambiguity a strategic tool to keep Russia engaged, or simply the result of rushed drafting and poor allied consultation?
Well, it's good to see him as always, Mona. Look, I think from the Washington perspective, and when I say the Washington perspective, we're talking about the White House perspective. President Trump wants this war over. He campaigned on it. He said he'd have it done in 48 hours. And we're now almost 12 months, a full year almost into his second term. The reality is they are trying to put both pressure and put incentives on the table to keep Russia and Ukraine engaged in peace talks, to keep it moving forward. The problem is, Mr. Williams pointed this out, is the capitulation aspect. If you look at the Witkoff program, it talks about limiting Ukrainian defense forces to 600,000. They would not be able to have their own Air Force new French fighter jets to be staged inside their own borders. They would have to be staged in Poland. There's several things, not to mention the fact the relinquishment of Ukrainian sovereign land to Russia, the eastern 20%. That's just a non-starter, and this gives pause to our European allies. From a Washington perspective, they don't know what is going to get this war to come to a peaceful conclusion as quickly as possible. They're basically throwing spaghetti on the wall to see what sticks, and that's a problem.
Mm-hmm. Mr. Williams, European governments said, as you said respectively, that they were not fully consulted. But the question is, and how other people would see it, how significant is this diplomatic failure inside NATO structures, and what does this reflect about the NATO structure?
Well, it reflects the fact that President Trump and the White House and his close confidants believe that they are powerful enough to impose decisions and impose conditions on NATO, the European Union, the World Bank, Ukraine, and this is a sort of hubris that I think is exposed by this plan, this idea, and it's not going to work because, first of all, as I said, it's incoherent. There's some things that are incoherent in the plan, but also it demands decisions of institutions which the Americans can't deliver.
So what you're saying here is that the United States is trying to show off its dominance.
Well, I think it's not to show off its dominance. It really believes that it is dominant, and it can dispense with the usual persuasive tools of diplomacy. And this is I think, the effect of the Middle East agreement, that they think that the Middle East template, the Gaza template, can be applied to Europe. And it can't, because the Europeans are much more opposed to American policy on Ukraine, or Trump's policy in Ukraine, than the Middle Eastern powers were in terms of stopping the war in Gaza.
And that in itself is something to be discussed here. Because what we're speaking about is the double standard way the international community are looking to two similar matters. Mr. Russell reporting shows the plan mirrors long-standing Russian demands. Territorial concessions, weapons limits, bans on foreign forces. Does this weaken Washington's credibility for its allies?
It kind of does. There's always been this waffling in the Trump administration on how to handle Ukraine. It starts off with that horrible Oval Office meeting last year between President Zelensky and President Trump, which escalated into a screaming match, basically. And then all of a sudden, when Putin comes to Alaska and basically plays Jedi mind tricks on President Trump, President Trump takes offenses, and all of a sudden we're back into the hands of Ukraine. The back and forth is doing more damage to the credibility on this issue. And I think that is why we see the European leaders like Macron, like Starmer, we're seeing them take a more proactive approach in trying to find a solution to this problem. Look, let's be real. The threat to Western Europe is more of a danger right now with Russia than it is for the United States. The United States can sit on the other side of the Atlantic and kind of play the great negotiator as much as they want. The real threat here is Russian aggression into NATO territory. That is a distinct and viable threat right now. As long as that threat continues, which Vladimir Putin has made it very clear, he wants to create an empire similar to what they saw during the height of the Soviet Union. As long as that mantra remains in play, Europe is under threat, and as such, they're going to do whatever it takes. This is why we're seeing Europe take advantage of the soft position that Washington has taken on Ukraine. We just saw the deal with the French fighter jets that was done between Macron and Zelensky the other day that was signed. We're seeing other defense contractors in Europe take up and improve and increase their production on weapons to support Ukraine and stave off Russian aggression. And we're starting to see the diplomatic side. Look, our NATO allies have a reason to be upset, because had they been consulted on this deal, there's a lot in there that would not be in play, such as rewarding Russia for aggression by giving them 20% of eastern Ukraine,
but
such
then,
as limiting.
Yes, Mr. Russell, but then you're speaking from the European perspective and from the American perspective, but we're not speaking about the Russian perspective, which was illustrated by Putin, that he wants to protect his own national security, and that there were some parts of the 2014 agreement that was made that was violated by the NATO. So while we're speaking about the Russian aggression, we're not speaking about the way the NATO acted towards Russia. We'll get to that. I'll get back to you about that. I'll get back to you about that. Let me go here to Mr. Williams first. If Ukraine gives up the possibility of NATO membership in exchange for the undefined NATO-style guarantees, what does that mean for deterrence in real operational terms?
Well, the problem with this deal, or the attitude between this deal, it calls into question whether the United States is still committed to NATO in terms of Article 5 and what NATO, including the Americans, agreed in the Hague summit in June this year, whether they believe that Russia is a threat or not, and the most immediate threat. So irrespective of what happens to this agreement, the attitudes behind this agreement, Witkoff's, presumably he reflects some idea of Trump. Does President Trump commit himself to NATO or not? Or does he believe that the United States is outside NATO and mediating between the NATO and Russia? And I think this is what the Europeans will have to deal with, and perhaps now they will have to confront President Trump with his illogicalities and his, as you put it, double standards.
Mm-hmm. Mr. Russell. Now you can answer or respond to my question, and also if you can answer how divided is Washington's internally. Are Trump's envoys, Pentagon analysts, and State Department diplomats aligned on this plan?
No, absolutely not. They're not aligned. Washington is completely fractured when it comes to the Ukrainian question. Look, we've seen many Republicans break away from President Trump and commit their support to NATO, to Ukraine, to preventing further expansion of Russian influence in Eastern Europe. Those that are completely 100% behind Trump are starting to see weakness in their support in their voter bloc. I think one of the things we have to realize here is that the Americans are tired of continued wars that involve our allies or our national strategic interests. This has been going on now for over 3 years. It's become almost a stalemate. Every time Russia makes a move further into Ukraine, the Ukrainians push them back, and the Russians receive significant losses in their military manpower and their military capabilities. What we have to realize here is that NATO is and will always be a key component of U.S. national strategic security. If we start backing away at this, it just empowers our adversaries. We've seen this with Russia. When everybody says that, or Trump loves to say that this never would have happened had he been president. I honestly don't believe that. I honestly believe that it was always Russia's intention to invade and expand its power into Ukraine. That being the case, Donald Trump is living in a dream world if he thinks that he has the influence to be able to stop this and make it equitable, not just for Ukraine, but for our European and NATO partners. Because if that were the case, this is not the deal that our NATO partners, let alone President Zelensky, would have put forth before them. You don't give away, you don't reward Russia for its bad actions. And this is kind of what this agreement does.
So you did not answer my question about seeing the whole from the whole issue from the Russian perspective.
Well, the Russian perspective is, Mona, and we've seen this since the Alaska meetings, is that Russia has the high ground. Russia has the advantage. Vladimir Putin continues to play his little mind games with Donald Trump. He continues to push the envelope, if you will, on what he's able to get with.
Mr. Russell, what Putin said was that the NATO started by announcing that it wants to put the ballistic missiles on the Ukrainian lands. Putin said that was that Ukraine said, or that the NATO was considering taking Ukraine into the NATO, and this was a violation, a complete violation to the 2014 agreement that was signed. So this is the Russian perspective from your point of view. From your point of view, is who started the violation at this from this perspective?
Russia did. Look, Mona, consider the source. It's Vladimir Putin. It's the Kremlin. They don't have exactly the greatest credibility on the global stage as far as giving salient talking points regarding who violated what. Russia has continued to show aggression to its neighbors. We've seen it in Georgia. We are now seeing it long term in Ukraine. The violations of sovereign airspace conducted by the Russian military just over the past 90 days has been very evident. Vladimir Putin is going to put out his rhetoric, and that is exactly what it is. It's rhetoric. There's always been talk of Ukraine joining NATO because Ukraine wants to join NATO. They need that security guarantee. Why? Because we've seen over the past 3 years exactly what's happened when you don't have that security guarantee. The idea of putting in ballistic missiles into Ukraine is ludicrous. It's false, and it's just propaganda for Vladimir Putin to continue to try and maintain some sort of semblance of support in his own country, rather than trying to prove that there's been violations of the 2014 agreement. This is incorrect. This is false propaganda put out by the Kremlin.
But if you said here, if you mentioned here, Mr. Russell, that Ukraine has the right to join NATO, this is one of the first violations to the 2014 agreement that stipulated that Ukraine should stay neutral. Okay, I'll get back to you. Let me go to Mr. Williams first. And Mr. Williams, Kiev has called the draft absurd and a provocation. What options does Ukraine have if the US pushes this plan harder?
Well, the only merit of the Trump plan, if it is a Trump plan, is that it faces the reality that Ukraine is losing on the battlefield. And what leverage President Trump has is that if Zelensky rejects this plan, then he will be faced with an even worse situation in a few months' time or next year. But the problem is that Zelensky cannot agree to this plan. This plan indicates that there will be elections in 100 days, within 100 days. And so I think the only options that Zelensky has is to say no and rally his people and rally the Europeans, or to hold an election and say, this is up to you, the people of Ukraine. Do you support
referendum? You're speaking here about a referendum?
Pardon?
You're speaking here about a nation referendum on the issue? Whether to accept or not?
The plan, so-called plan,
yeah,
stipulates that there will be Ukrainian elections in 100 days.
Mm-hmm.
And actually, the Rada, the Ukrainian parliament, is gradually preparing for elections. And so possibly the electorate will decide whether to accept or not. But Zelensky cannot, because it will be a capitulation and it will be a ceding of territory to Russia, which no Ukrainian, Zelensky or not.
But before going to elections, do you think that Zelensky would put this matter to referendum, national referendum, whether people would accept such a plan or not? Is
well,
that,
I think
or could that be?
It may come to that because, as we were saying, the situation on the battlefield is desperate, despite European support, financial and military. And so maybe the Ukrainians will have enough and say there should be a deal, not this one, but there should be a deal to cede territory, but not to cede anything else.
Right. I guess our time is out. I have to end it here. That was a great discussion anyway. We thank our guests, Mr. Nicholas Williams in Brussels and Mr. Justin Thomas Russell in Florida, for their insight and for helping us navigate one of the most contested diplomatic initiatives of this year. As the Witkoff Plan sparks new divisions, one truth remains clear: peace demands clarity, not confusion. Many thanks for watching, and stay tuned for the next episode. And I guess that brings us to the end of today's episode of In Depth. Many thanks for joining us.